You have found the Redhead Family Therapy Guy and a Mic podcast, looking at mental health through a pop culture lens. Welcome back, everyone, to the interview series with Kevin Shaw, Part 2, where we talk about Superman. We hope you enjoy.
Right.
All right, so segue back in.
Well, I think the value of these characters, we talk about Harry Potter, we talk about Star Wars, and it's like, well, why are they so important to our lexicon? Mm-hmm. You know, why are they important to our culture, for that matter? I mean, Star Wars really, really spoke to our culture.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it became a phenomenon.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, holy cow, look at the impact of it. And it's like, so much of that script and so much of these lines are part of the words we say to each other. I mean, it's just...
Yeah.
And we know what everyone means when you say things like that, you know, and it's just, it permeates through our culture. And I think the same way that a lot of these myths, a lot of these legends exist. I mean, the legends of Hercules and the Iliad and, the Odyssey and all of these stories that just continue and continue and continue, it's because we pull something from it. We learn something from it, whether it's the actions of the characters, whether it's the characters themselves, or, larger, archetypes and larger principles that we take from them. And I mean, I go back and it's like, okay, what are major cultural linchpins? What are major touchstones in these cultures? And it's like, well, Star Wars 77 has a massive ripple effect past that. But it's like, I look back and go, well, the biggest one that we've had, at least in American culture, is I believe it was April of 1938, and we got Superman. Mm. And because, I mean, there were superheroes and comic book characters before that. I mean, there was the Flash, and there was like Doc Savage and the Phantom and all these things. But these were primarily men who just did extraordinary things.
Sure.
These were the templates for Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
But
they didn't have the same gravity.
Well, they're humans, right?
Right. They were human.
Where Superman is superhuman, right?
Correct.
He's an alien.
Right. And I think what's so interesting about it is that the first Superman took about 10 years to become Superman. I mean, it wasn't until the radio show that they had him fly. He would jump. Crazy. He could leap tall buildings with a single bound. But it was in the radio show they said, well, how's he going to get around? And they're like, well, we have this little wind effect. And they go, oh, he flew. Look it up in the sky. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman. And so it's like he would fly. And that came out of the radio show. And then Kryptonite came from the radio show because the guy who played Superman's like, I'm going on vacation. And they're like, what? And they're like, he's on vacation. Oh, well, a piece of kryptonite has knocked Superman out. And so that, that came from that. And it was just all these things that we know about the Superman legacy and lore had to be grown and built from 38. In 38, he was just this really strong guy who was bulletproof and could throw a car and jump over a building. He was just a Superman.
Yeah.
But then he's grown into something that we know in the lexicon. Most of us know Superman's lore the same way we know the Christmas story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean the Nativity Christmas story, not the
awesome
shoot your eye out kid Christmas story.
Not the awesome movie that we should do.
Believe it or not, I don't like it.
Oh, I love it.
I know.
Let's not segue.
No. It's like saying I don't like cheese. Or like, but I mean, everyone knows that tale of Superman, and why it's so important is because it's the modern messianic tale.
It is, for sure.
And what's ironic about the whole thing is that Siegel and Schuster were two Jewish boys from Illinois.
Oh.
And they put together this idea of this last son of Krypton who came to Earth and became and rose to be Superman. Yeah. And what's the wildest thing about it is I always test this because this is literally my thesis paper. I didn't go for a doctorate, but I wrote this massive essay on Superman, and my professor was like, "You're out of your mind." I'm like, "Read it." He came back, he's like, A-. And that was
that's awesome.
Asking you two guys, what's Superman's greatest power? What would you say is Superman's greatest power?
Well, all right. So I might go off the rails. I might upset you. But
Well, let's let Mike then.
No, I can still have an opinion. No, hold on. So I loved the Smallville series.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why I love the Smallville series is because he's so dang good.
Right.
And so I think his superpower is that genuine, charismatic, altruistic, you can count on, there's not an evil bone in his body, and that goodness that shines through. And you just can't help it.
Okay, so you killed my setup, but
with Welling in that smile, I mean, he's just a gorgeous man, and so it's just like it just sings to your soul,
Right.
man. The goodness and the integrity. It's what I love to cite another archetypal story that we love that we're gonna do is the Way of King series by Brandon Sanderson and Kaladin. You know? And Kaladin is a vexed man, and he is just as good as they come. Like.
Right.
To his core, he's struggling with these, he's struggling
vexed
against
because he wants to do the right thing.
Well, and he's struggling
that he's not.
even between two great principles, that of being a healer and that of being a protector, that seem to contradict one another. And he wants to figure out a way to be them both, which they kind of violate each other. You know what I mean? And so anyway,
well,
I feel like
you
Superman. I feel like he does the right thing at all costs, right? And for me, that's a superpower because I think how hard is it to do the right thing?
period.
right.
Yeah.
Now, you're both exactly right. Most people will be like, "Oh, he can fly and shoot lasers."
Come on, no, we're therapists.
Oh, I know. So thankfully, I'm talking to a higher ilk. So all right, I got to up my game a little bit. So
This is what
you're
we do
exactly
for
right.
a living.
Exactly
This is why we started a podcast.
In given an impossible situation where it's like two bad situations, he'll always pick he'll find a third solution that is correct, and it is impeccable morality.
Impeccable.
So
I love that. That's a great term.
what is interesting to me is the dichotomy of his heritage, in that Jor-El, his Kryptonian father, by DNA imbues Kal-El with all of the powers to be a god.
Right.
He is effectively a god.
Yeah. But then giving him
Jonathan Kent, giving him a name Clark, imbues him with the morality to be a servant god.
Yeah.
Rather than being let me rule, let me serve.
And Mr. Dukes of Hazzard knocks it out of the park in Smallville, dude. I mean, if that guy isn't a
John Schneider,
if he's not the quintessential American farm father, that's one of the things that's beautiful about the story.
Think about this.
Smallville, I mean.
Schuster, all right. Jerry and Joel thought, hey, we should have him be raised where? Not in New York City, not in Metropolis, not in wherever, but on a farm of just good, wholesome Christian, work with your hands, Midwestern farmers.
Yeah.
Why did they value that over being, hey, he was born and raised in Chicago or on the moon or wherever?
Well, and then the antithesis of that is Lex Luthor,
Correct.
right?
That's a good point.
Everything about Lex.
Cutthroat,
That's why Lex is his greatest foil.
Yeah.
Because Lex is everything the opposite. His motivations are self-serving. He is mortal, and he's vexed by his morality.
Yeah.
He is in peak physical condition. They don't talk about that much.
Yeah.
But Lex is always in peak physical condition.
Which another plug. And I loved Lex in Smallville.
Right.
He was fantastic. I mean, it was just a fantastic. I mean, there's so much that's campy about a lot of it, but Lex it was great.
Right.
It was fantastic.
But to that point,
he has a podcast, by the way.
He does, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I've actually caught a few episodes. But see, that is why, if you look at what Superman is that he is a servant god. He is perpetually self-sacrificing to the point that he's like, I can't be married to Lois. I can't do this. I can't do these things.
Well, even his mom is still just like this poor old lady in the middle of middle America. You know what I mean?
Well,
it's always tragic.
There was a series that came out, I want to say about 10 years ago. It was called All-Star Superman. And it had done what Superman comics had failed to do for a long, long time. And that was get the tone of Superman right. There's a beautiful sequence where there is a young woman who is she's on the top of a building. She's contemplating suicide. And all of a sudden, Superman just lands behind her. and he hangs his feet over the edge, and he sits down with her, and they talk. He's
Nice.
not punching the bad guy to death. He's not
Or
lifting.
saving her half
no.
soul.
This
No,
is
no.
what was this? This was a comic series.
It's a comic
Oh,
book.
that's very
Yeah,
cool.
and it's called
Look
All
that.
Star Superman, and he
cool
literally just has this conversation with her about life and the meaning of life.
That's
and she
cool.
gets up and walks away, and
cool.
he kind of floats off and he's like, "Hey, it's good
Have
to
a
see
good
you,"
day.
and he flies off. And there's another sequence where he saves this little boy from this wreck. And it's one of the best exchanges. He saves his kid from this car wreck or whatever it is. And the kid looks at him and he's like, "Hey, man, nice costume." And he goes, "Thanks. My mom made it for me."
Awesome.
And he flies off. And it's like, it absolutely gets you to the point that he's not naive and he's not innocent,
Yeah.
but he's pure.
Right.
And he goes, "Thanks. My mom made it for
Awesome.
me." Not embarrassed of my mom made it for me.
Yeah, right.
My mom made this costume for me. Martha Kent stitched this together.
That's
And that's why it matters. Now there's very few times that they get Superman right. Because it's impossible to write for Jesus.
Yeah.
It's impossible to
Yeah.
write for this
Sure.
character.
Right.
It's like, can he punch it? Can he lift it? That's pretty much the
Right.
comics.
Right.
Can he beat it to death or
Yep.
can he lift it over his head and throw it? And it's like, oh, that's so poor writing. Some of the best writing is challenging his principles.
Yeah.
And it's challenging,
Yeah.
will he find the right? One of the best ones is
Yeah, I mean, putting that in ethical dilemmas. I mean, they could really do a reboot
yeah.
in such a powerful way if they made it more ethically.
one of the best ever written was written by the same guy who wrote The Watchmen, who's a dark dude. And it's called For the Man Who Has Everything. And the story begins with Batman and Wonder Woman flying to the Fortress of Solitude for Kal-El's birthday, for Superman's birthday. And the joke is that Wonder Woman got this super rare gift for him and all this stuff. And Batman basically just got him cash. Because Batman
gift
is
that never stops on
well,
giving.
Batman is so reserved and
Sure.
Now, mind you, there's some great exchanges where, of course, Batman knows that Superman is Clark Kent.
Yeah.
And Superman, of course, can see through his cowl, so he knows he's Bruce Wayne. So they both know who he is.
Right.
There's not in this comic, but in another one, he's Superman breaks something of Batman's. He's like, "Well, I'll buy you a new one, or I'll get you a new one." He goes, "On a reporter's salary," and he's just like, ugh. So he's like, "Don't worry, I got it." But
That's 3 years for you, buddy.
yeah, whatever. So anyway, they show up, and Superman is in a coma, and he's got this weird plant, this alien plant that's all wrapped around him. And it's got him in this unbreakable coma.
Yeah.
And they can't get it off of him. They can't kill it. They can't do anything. They're doing their best to try to get this off of Superman, but they know he's just completely comatose.
Yeah.
Then we cut to Superman's mind. And what happens is that all of a sudden he wakes up in bed on Krypton. And he's married to Lois, but they're on Krypton. And his parents are alive. And Krypton is flourishing, and he comes downstairs, and his wife's making breakfast for him for his day, and Jonathan, his like 5-year-old son, comes down. "Happy birthday, Dad!" Gives him a big hug, and he's like, day in a life. This is great. "Oh, hey, what's for breakfast? Oh, love you." Give you a kiss on the cheek, and he goes, "Do you know where Dad is?" "Oh, your dad's in his lab up in the tower, up in downtown Krypton, wherever the major city is." And so he goes and he visits his dad, and he has this great day with his dad. But then the Matrix starts to break.
Right.
Little things start skipping, and he's like, "Well, that doesn't make sense. That's not right.
Right.
That's not right." And he starts questioning. He's like, "This isn't right. This isn't. Wait a minute, this isn't my life."
Yeah.
And his dad's like, "Don't question it. Just live in it. Don't question it." And Lois is like, "Why would you want to ruin this?" And he has these moments with his son. And he's like, "I know you're not real, but you're everything.
I've always wanted.
Everything I've always wanted."
Yeah.
He looks at his dad and he's like, "This is everything I've always wanted." And he's looking around, he's like, "Oh my gosh." And he's a normal man. He's not super by any means. He can't fly, he can't lift a truck.
Yeah, 'cause
he's on
Krypton.
Krypton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's just like, "Oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do?" And there's this horrible, the world starts to break apart because he's breaking the Matrix with his own mind. And he's like, "I can't live in this. I can't accept living here." And there's this moment where he is weeping, apologizing to his 5-year-old son, saying, I have to kill you. I can't live here.
Yeah.
And by refusing to live here, you disappear.
Yeah.
And he is woefully, balefully saying, you're everything I've wanted, and I have to let you go. Yeah. And he says goodbye to his dad, and he says goodbye to this little boy. And the world shatters around him, and he wakes from this fever dream. And what it is that it's a parasite that absolutely drowns the brain in dopamine while it eats the body away.
Crazy.
And it's like, I've never had a Superman before.
Giving you
this is
everything you want to try to keep you there.
Until you die.
Why it grows.
Yeah, while it kills you.
The worm.
And eventually the parasite kills the host and it goes to something else. And like Brainiac sent it to him or something like that. But it is the challenge of, I will let go of everything I've always wanted.
How symbolic is that of like addiction?
Oh,
right?
God.
Like this, how powerful addiction can become to where it just consumes you with this
with the
lie.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? With this lie. But the lie seems so
tantalizing.
appealing.
Well, because you just get constant dopamine from it.
Yeah.
Right? And so-
Oh, that's such a that's a comic again?
It's a comic.
Which,
it's
do you
called For the
remember?
Man Who Has Everything.
I'm
That would
gonna
be
have to
such a
look
great- you know
that
what a
up.
great-
That's
And they
awesome.
did an episode of it for I believe Justice Unlimited. They did a
Okay.
cartoon episode. I believe you can find it on
Man.
YouTube.
That would be
It
a
is
great movie,
outstanding.
especially if you started it with him on Krypton. So the movie started with him in his
So you don't know it's fake.
So, you know, so you think that this like this is an
Yeah.
alternate story.
The problem is that
of
people would be like,
Superman.
well, wait. Well, that doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
right.
So
Yeah.
the problem is that the audience who's already familiar will not go in on the joke with you. It has to start with Batman and Wonder Woman.
You could have him driving somewhere.
That's-
Well, they flying in on her jet.
Yeah, you could
On
have
her-
That's just so powerful, though. And that you said that was the Watchmen writer did.
Yeah, why am I
good.
blanking on his name for the
No,
life
I
of me?
can't think what his name is.
I don't know.
But he had a way of getting around. He did superheroes better than anyone because he could dismantle the character and say, well, what's their core? What's their And the core of Superman is, will he do what's right, even though it's the most painful?
Yeah.
Alan Moore.
Alan Moore, thank you very much, Alan Moore, and he
That's
did a
awesome.
few
That's cool.
he did a few Superman.
Now
stories.
I want to go back and watch Superman movies.
Well,
It's been a while since I've watched Superman movies.
It's
I haven't
hard.
gotten into the new ones. I haven't gotten the new DC. I think
I've
it's
seen
been,
all
it's been
the new
hard for
ones.
me to buy into DC. I want to, but it's been hard for me
I've
to buy
always
into
loved DC.
But
Yeah.
it's just because of the quality, right? Like what's the
Oh, the movies. You
Aquaman?
mean
Yeah,
the
like
movies.
Aquaman
Yeah.
was like, I'm sorry,
See,
guys.
the problem is that Richard Donner came to the property going, listen, Superman comes with all the trappings. And this is the first superhero movie. This is the first comic book movie.
Right.
77? Are you kidding me?
back
Which
in
is
70s.
great,
This is
by the way.
the French Connection, The Exorcist, The Omen,
Yeah.
Superman.
Right. And it's a great movie. I mean,
It's
a
phenomenal.
classical great
It's a
movie.
phenomenal movie, but it wouldn't have happened without two people. Christopher Reeve,
Yeah.
who did it genuine.
Yeah, he did.
And then of course Richard Donner, who says, I am playing this real. I'm playing it real. We're gonna play it real. And everyone's like, that sounds ridiculous.
Like doing it.
And he's like, it's New York City. It's like, hey man, nice outfit. You know, and he's like, oh thanks, and he flies off, and you're like, what is this? But he played it sincere. And that's why Reeves will always be my I'm 43.
Sure.
So Reeve will always be Superman.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is that when you start getting into like the quest for peace and, the 3 and 4,
It gets a little trashy.
it's hard because now it's political and now it's this and now you got
That always ruins everything.
you got Richard Pryor getting in there and making, cracking wise, and you're like, oh, good gravy. But it was the original arc of Donner's 1 and 2. And if you do get the chance to see 2, the Donner cut of 1 and 2, do it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll have
I don't
to
think I even
watch-
remember to.
I don't remember much. I've seen
That's
one
General
and two.
Zod.
I remember when I was
Zod
young.
came in, kneel before Zod.
I barely
yeah.
remember. I don't remember it. Yeah, I mean, I think I've watched the first one quite a few times.
Phantom Zone and Zod.
But I don't think I've ever gotten into watching 2, 3, and 4.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the Donner cut does not have Lois's terrible poem. Can you read my thoughts? Do you know what I'm thinking? It's the worst. It's so groany. It's like, oh, this is terrible. But yeah, the movies haven't really morally challenged Superman, except for at the very end where he pulls a dead Lois out of the ravine, and he goes and like, I'm gonna reverse time.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. I guess.
Movie magic. Let's just
I mean, that one's, but see, that's an incredibly selfish act.
Yeah.
And that's not Superman.
Right.
Yeah.
I hear you.
But
Fair enough.
You know, that was tough. Now, what's funny is that Henry Cavill is a outstanding Superman, and he loves the property. Mm-hmm. He honors the property. The problem is that he's been forced through the Snyderverse to do questionable Superman things.
Oh, okay.
All right. Like, I'll tell you what, you watch the actual Man of Steel preview versus the movie itself, totally different. Totally different.
How do you see the preview? Can you find it
YouTube.
online or?
It's on
okay.
YouTube. Yeah, the actual preview is on YouTube. And it's like, it's this, because I have a love for Jonathan Kent. Because Jonathan Kent,
me too.
Jonathan Kent is like Joseph to Jesus.
Right.
How do I raise this kid?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the only way I know how to raise him is, okay, I'm going to teach you how to work on the farm. I'm going to teach you what my dad taught me. I'm going to teach you work ethic.
Yeah.
I'm going to teach you your word means something. I'm going to teach you go the extra mile. I'm going to teach you these things. So, and I realize that kind of reiterates everything we were talking about before.
But how interesting we've come full circle.
So, not to say my dad is Jonathan Kent, but I am to say I am Superman.
Well, I think it's appealing because I think when you become a father, I think there's a sense of us that want to portray that, right?
Sure.
Yeah. We feel that. We feel like, how do I raise this child?
How do I raise this kid? I'm like, oh my gosh, this is real.
And we have this sense of I want to do the right thing, and it's scary and it's hard.
It's terrifying.
But I think when we see Joseph did it,
right,
and Jonathan Kent, I think it's neat to see that maybe it's not so difficult. Just be yourself.
I agree, and but why Man of Steel is interesting to me and why it's kind of a conundrum is I was very excited for Kevin Costner to be Jonathan. I was like, ooh, this is gonna be good. And in the preview, you see a little bit of Jonathan presents the ship to Clark, and then he says, this is how we found you. And then it cuts to a tearful 12, 13, 14-year-old boy. He goes, I just want to be your son. And he grabs him. He goes, you are. And I was like, okay, I'm in 100%. Sign me up.
You got me.
You got me. And then I watched the movie, and Jonathan's like, maybe you should have let those kids die. Because I'm so scared of the government getting you. I'm so scared of the scientists
it doesn't work.
making you into ET.
It doesn't work.
And I'm like, Jonathan never would have done that.
Never
in a million years would have done that. And then
it goes
for
to that
him,
fear idea, the idea of parenting from a place of fear.
Yeah.
Right?
And then for him to be like, don't come and save me, Clark. I'll die by tornado.
Yeah.
And it was like, no. The problem is that Jonathan had to die
in a way he couldn't be saved.
In a way that Clark never could have saved him.
They didn't get it right.
But then he learns humanity has value and humanity is fragile. Right. Life is fragile. And he had to learn those lessons. And to rob him of that means that Zach doesn't understand. It means that Zach doesn't understand the character.
Yeah,
and that's why I have a problem with it.
Because a lot of people have heard that.
You've taken that from him.
Right.
And so now you have a mopey, moody Superman who's like, I don't know if I should do the right thing. And you're like, but that's his number one ability.
That's his superpower.
And that's what we expect of Superman.
Yeah, that's great.
We need, as a culture, to look at this character because we've effectively killed our gods.
Well, and that's and that's really, I mean, pointing this dilemma out or this character fail out is I think a manifestation of the problem that's coming to fruition nowadays is that we're missing the altruistic, or I would just say even bigger than that, the true story that we need. And I think that we're fighting over our souls, and there's a cultural war and political wars that are happening in the greater cultural context that we find ourselves, and we're struggling, as Nietzsche kind of predicted, that
we killed our God.
We're killing our gods. We're not honoring the truth, and so we don't have a story to act out. We don't have guideposts of thousands of years of truth.
You said you're older than me. How old are you?
45.
45. Okay, so, and how old are you?
38.
Okay, so we're pretty much within the same wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Think about it this way. Superman, 38. Who were our dads were raised on Cowboys and Indians, and the Cowboys and Roy Rogers and the singing cowboy who's also the gunslinger. All right, and it's the man who stood for the law in the Wild West.
Yeah.
But then after that, when that became passe, it was the heroes of aerospace. We had John Glenn. We broke the sound barrier, and we've got this and we got that, and now we have jet aircraft, and we have those people that segued into the astronauts.
Yeah.
And then from the astronauts and the soldiers coming home, we had like the G.I. Joe characters. We had, Sergeant Rock, and we had all these characters who were coming in who were aspirational. Mm-hmm. By the 80s, we've effectively killed these gods of our culture. And so you and I are looking up to Optimus Prime as, hey, a semi-truck, but he's also talking about humans or the sovereignty of individual life.
Yeah.
And you're like,
whoa,
Peter Cullen's talking to me through a freaking truck.
Right.
By the way, I got to meet Peter Cullen.
If anything took me back to 11-year-old boy status, it was seeing Transformers and hearing Optimus Prime talk. I was an 11-year-old boy with a Coke and popcorn in my hand.
Well, I was a kid in 1986 sobbing when they killed Optimus.
Yeah.
Sobbing.
Yeah.
And I was like, you killed Dad.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And it's like you talked, and Peter Cullen's done interviews where he's like, I based him on two people: my brother, who was a decorated Marine from Vietnam, and John Wayne.
That's awesome.
And it's like, because he had to be the impeccable leader.
Mm-hmm.
He had to be the impeccable leader.
Well, it's interesting too, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why the Marvel Universe has become what it is because it is a place where you get some really fantastic.
You get some heroes.
You get some real heroes.
But of that lineup, who is that character?
Well, it's Captain America,
it's
probably.
Captain America.
Yeah, man, it's Captain
and
America.
I'll tell you what, if you asked me before the first movie came out, they're like, hey, the guy who played the Human Torch on Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
And the dude from Not Another Teen Movie is going to be Captain America. I'm like, I'm burning all of this down to the ground. I was like, there's no way.
It.
And then I watched Chris Evans, and he had that exchange with Dr. Not Einstein. It wasn't Einstein, but he's like, you are a good man. And he pokes him in the chest.
Yeah.
And he says, the reason why this will work is because you're a good man.
Yeah.
When you saw a 95-pound Steve Rogers jump on the grenade, I'm like, done.
That's
done.
Powerful.
Because it was, I'm the guy who's going to lay on the wire.
Yeah.
I'm that guy. And you're like, well, that's Captain America.
And they want to try to get rid of that story, but you don't get rid of that story. And I don't know why you would.
No.
Like, why are you trying to get rid of the story where people lay down for the greater good? It's like, you can't get rid of that story. That's the story. That's the story of humanity.
But here's the great thing about it is Tony Stark, first movie. Iron Man.
Love Iron Man.
It's all about Iron Man. Yeah. I'm Iron Man.
Still great.
I'm the guy. But look at Stark's arc. Look at the first Avengers.
Yeah. Oh,
what does Rogers say to him? You're not the guy. You're not the guy to make the sacrifice play. You're not the guy to lay down on the wire. I think I just cut the wire. He always has a quip.
Yeah.
He always has a technological answer, and he always had a way out. And that is why Endgame, I had a problem with Endgame.
Yeah,
I had a problem with Endgame. But when I look at Tony Stark's arc.
Well, he shows it to you in Avengers too, right? You get it in Avengers too.
Yeah, he takes the missile. Yeah. That's great, but it was still. But then we undo all of that in number 2, where he's like, let's make Ultron.
Yeah,
let's just
totally.
Well,
it's his fault. Maybe
he's Frankenstein. He created Frankenstein's monster, and he's to blame for blame for Sokovia, and that is why he supports the Accords, because he's living with the fact that I did this.
Yeah.
And they don't come out right and say it, but if you connect it, you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, Stark is living with, I did all of this. Mm-hmm. I'm to blame. But by Endgame, he realizes I'm the only guy who can make this play, and he undoes Rogers' call that you're not the sacrifice player. and he earns his worthiness. We know that Rogers, as being a good man, was worthy to lift Mjolnir.
Yeah.
And that's why Thor's like, I knew it! He just roars. And I'll tell you what, dude, that theater became apoplectic.
Yeah, it's totally
when he lifted the hammer and he catches it.
Yeah.
Apoplectic. The movie could have ended. I'm like, I'm done.
Yeah.
You got me.
Grab the wife, I'm out
Take
the door.
my money.
I was done. I'm like, that's all it took. And him putting the goods to freaking Thanos with the hammer, you're like, you get Captain America's arc. But what's funny is that Captain America never really grows.
It's true.
Leia never really grows. She didn't need to because the principles were there.
Yeah.
She showed softness, but we knew she had love for others.
Which I suppose is, I suppose
Cap didn't really. He had to. His principles had to be challenged.
Yeah, but they were
us,
they were there.
But he never had to grow.
and maybe that's part of the challenge that's happening with the wokeness is that a lot of these stories fall on male figures, and so I think they're our culture is grappling with what story do you give women that have that punch, right? And I think that's part of what's happening. I don't want to
No.
And I think
agree.
and so I think it's like these Leia doesn't grow, and so it's like where do you tell these stories or tell that story?
Right.
Which is something they're trying to figure out.
But you know what? I don't think we ever lacked heroines.
Right.
Ripley was as badass as any Schwarzenegger character ever was.
Yeah.
And what's funny about that is if you go onto Netflix and you watch the movies that made us, there's a phenomenal documentary about Aliens, the second one.
Yeah, Aliens is definitely
Okay.
Yeah.
And James Cameron said, I was writing the original script for that movie was not Aliens. It was called Mother. And it was about two combating mothers. Think about it. Ellen Ripley wakes up from 54 years of cryogenic sleep to learn that her daughter, her 10-year-old or teenage daughter, has since died.
Yeah.
Has outgrown her and died. So now she's a grieving mother. Okay. They go to the Marine base, the colony base, and they find Newt, the little girl.
Yeah.
She immediately surrogates this little girl. And who is she up against? The queen.
Yeah.
The alien queen. We're not just killing one alien on a spaceship. We are now up against a queen. So now you have two mothers battling it out. And it's like their strength to be praised here.
Yeah.
Right.
And there is strength in motherhood, and you should honor motherhood. And there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And James Cameron made a phenomenal murder spree of a movie.
Yeah.
That's a blood and guts horror movie action flick. But ultimately, it's about two battling mothers.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is good content. This is good praising matriarchal content.
Well, that's the problem. Is that's the story that they want to get rid.
They want to make a female patriarchy. And I go, no.
You don't need to do
praise
that.
Praise matriarchy.
I don't know.
Praise
why. Yeah.
motherhood.
Well, it's interesting because Cameron also does Terminator and Terminator 2, right?
And they're about
Sarah Connor.
Sarah Connor, who is
Bad A.
total. She kills the bad guy at the end. It's not Kyle Reese.
Nope.
And what does she do it all for?
Her son, the future.
Yeah. Isn't it
all right?
cool?
Yeah, that's very
because women are the future.
Yeah.
Women produce children. And so it's like he had because he was raised by a
You
single
might have
mom.
just got us demonetized. Oh wait, we're not. So
yeah, it's okay. So I apologize. Sorry, YouTube. But that whole thing is he keeps going back to it.
Yeah.
Who survives Titanic? Rose.
Yeah.
He's a huge feminist.
Yeah.
All right.
True.
Monster feminist. I mean, I was not a big fan of Avatar because it was basically Fern Gully.
I loved Avatar.
Yeah, I've had
Really?
a hard time with
I did.
Avatar.
It's
too.
Dances with Wolves, bro.
I enjoyed it.
I felt like
enjoyed
Avatar was almost, it was like a sci-fi Titanic.
Oh,
movie.
no.
I liked
It's Dances with Wolves.
Yeah.
I'm going to be an Indian and be one of them, and now I'm going to fight the American cavalry. And
My
it was
favorite
Fern Gully,
scene
the
of
same-
Dances with Wolves is when he's like taking a dump and the guy's like riding like taking a dump next to him, and Kevin Costner looks over and he's like, put that in your book.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
That's my favorite scene.
I do like when the scouts see him and he was shaving in the pond and he's got half his beard off and he's got his gun, he's in his underwear and he's like freaked out because he's never seen a native before. And he's like, oh. That movie's outstanding. You go back and watch that and you're like,
I liked it.
That's great.
Oh, Kevin Costner.
Costner does westerns better than most.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us for another one.
Thank you, Kevin.
It was way
awesome.
too long.
No, it's just fun. It's just fun.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
All right. Adios.
See ya.